Now, love or hate The Last Jedi, there's one phrase or saying from that movie spoken by Kylo Ren to Rey that has become famous or infamous within the Star Wars community, which is, let the past die, kill it if you have to. Kylo Ren then talks about forgetting everything, the Jedi and the Sith, all of it, and that he wants to go on to build his own entirely new thing. And a lot of fans who don't like the movie joke about how that's exactly what the movie is all about or does, that it forgets the history of Star Wars or lets it die, and tries to build something new from the ashes, while those who like the film often get angered by those who joke about it and use or overuse that line, because they'll tell you that's not the message of the movie, that it's actually about the opposite. The Last Jedi is supposed to be about how important it is to remember the past and to try and learn from the mistakes of the past. And to be clear before going on, since a lot of people who do indeed like the film seem to think one of the reasons why people don't like it is because they don't understand it or that message, well, those who don't like it, by and large, do understand the message. They know what the movie is supposed to be about. They simply use Kylo's words to mock the movie or to point out that it seems to be very meta, that it seems to be aware that it is destroying its own past. Anyway, as I've said before, and this comes from someone who is not a fan of the movie, I certainly don't disagree with the message of the movie, the learn from the past message. I also think there is an interesting idea or premise here overall that it could have worked in this movie because it's one that can and has worked for other stories or movies or books in the past. It's not like saying learn from the mistakes of the past was a completely original message or idea that Rian Johnson came up with. In fact, it's an extremely common saying or message, as is one about those who don't learn from the mistakes of the past being doomed to repeat them. Those who don't learn from history are destined to make the same wrong turns as those who have gone before them. And though my opinion on The Last Jedi itself hasn't changed and likely never will, I can't help but suddenly find the movie, or at least its message, rather relevant. Because suddenly we find ourselves living in a world, or at least a country here in the US where I am, where many people believe letting the past die, killing it or tearing it down if they have to, is the right approach to building a better future. And well, maybe I shouldn't say or imply this is somehow a new belief. There's always been people who want to tear down history and shape their own version of the future. The difference is nowadays people are buying into it, the idea of it, more than ever. And this is where I feel like I have to point out that Kylo Ren, the one who wanted to destroy the past and make his own future, was actually the villain of that story. He was the one in the wrong. And Luke Skywalker, who was haunted by one giant mistake of his past, who wouldn't or couldn't forget it, was or would end up being the hero of the story. He was the one who realized that the mistakes of the past are an opportunity to grow and learn, to be better going forward. And so you could certainly say that the message of that movie is that history should not just be seen as an ugly reminder of how bad things once were. It shouldn't just be seen as a stain on the past that we must try to scrub out at all cost and forget about, but rather that it should always remain. It should always be taught. It should be used as a measuring stick to see how far we've come as a society. No, things aren't perfect today, and spoiler alert, things are never going to be perfect in this world, but to deny steps have been made in the right direction is a disservice to us as a people. Progress tends to spur more progress. Hope begets more hope. Sometimes when you realize how far you've already come on a journey, it helps you to carry on, to push forward. But instead of even acknowledging any strides have been made in the right direction, today we tend to only look at how far we've yet to go. We get nothing but angry at the mistakes of the past and fail to realize that, though flawed, many of those who came before us took the first steps down the path we still walk today. And along these same lines, we as individuals are flawed too, and we always will be, though we live in a society that increasingly demands you to be perfect at every turn. Do or say something stupid in public, and someone's bound to record it and put it online for the whole world to see, and cancellation is usually soon to follow. And never mind how ridiculous it is that many will look at a 30-second clip, usually taken out of context, of a person they've never met and literally know nothing about, and they'll then judge that person and render a final verdict based on, again, a 30-second clip out of context. And no, before deciding their fate, certainly don't take into consideration that it may actually be one of the worst, lowest, and stupidest moments of their entire life. That something before the camera started rolling maybe had pushed them to the brink. Never mind that they made a mistake, because it's not like you judging at home have ever made a mistake before, right? One that thankfully no one caught on camera and posted for the world to see. I mean, certainly you'd be okay with everyone knowing and seeing the dumbest thing you've ever done. and making assumptions about every other aspect of your life and who you are just from that. And since I always like taking it back to Star Wars, imagine if this had happened to Luke Skywalker. Imagine if one of his other students had filmed him that fateful night when he went into his nephew's hut and activated a lightsaber while standing over him, ready to apparently strike him down for crimes he hadn't committed yet. Imagine if that video was the only thing you'd ever seen or known about Luke, that one moment in time when he was at his absolute lowest. Imagine if the story that came out about him was how this guy was ready to murder his nephew because he felt he might do something bad one day. Imagine how fast we would cancel Luke Skywalker. And I know that's a bit of a silly example, nor am I saying I even like that scene in the movie, but it would be ridiculous to forever condemn Luke Skywalker for what he did that one night. Not only do we know the context around it, for the most part anyway, but we know the rest of Luke's story, all the good he has done in his life and would go on to do. And when we're rational, we accept that all of us will make mistakes, even big mistakes sometimes. And the important thing, as the movie tries to tell us, is that we learn from those mistakes. And no, I'm certainly not saying here that sometimes people don't make some really big mistakes, or that they don't intentionally do horrible things to others, and in those cases, punishment is certainly appropriate. But the idea or belief that either the individual or a society on the whole will just inherently be perfect someday, somehow, especially if no mistakes are permitted by the individual, and if the past is not examined to know where things have gone wrong before, well, it's a recipe for disaster. It's an unattainable standard. Which, no, doesn't mean you give up on the idea or goal of a society that gives fair and equal opportunity and treatment to all, but you have to be careful about creating one that demands equal outcome for all. Because, like it or not, human beings are competitive, which is not a bad thing. When people compete, they go above and beyond, they create new things and ways of doing things, and so on. But if no matter how hard you try or how much you give, you'll only be given the same amount or reward as someone doing little or nothing, well, where's the motivation? I mean, imagine if in professional sports we stopped keeping track of win and loss records, we stopped crowning champions at the end of the season, we stopped keeping track of stats, and if every single player got paid the exact same amount. How many people would watch sports? How many athletes would try as hard as they can to make it in pro sports? And I know that some people will say in regards to all this, the idea of equal outcome for everybody, well, that it's great for the betterment of all, which, yes, is great and everything, and some people will certainly work hard for the betterment of everyone, even with minimal or no reward or extra compensation, and those people are certainly to be commended. But most people simply do not work that way. Most people cannot be Jedi-like. Most people don't want to be or can't be completely selfless and work so hard or give so much without reaping some sort of benefit from it. And again, a world devoid of competition that doesn't reward hard work and innovation is likely one that will become stagnant. Alright, and at this point I'm probably mostly rambling, and I'm certainly not talking about Star Wars anymore. And the funny part is, when I made this channel roughly 4 years ago now, my intent was to strictly talk Star Wars, and my intent has not changed, or never entirely will. And yet I can't help but feel like that, for better or worse, would happen with the sequel trilogy, and especially with how political things got around The Last Jedi, that it dragged me into talking about things and topics I never intended when I started out, and I'm even making a series of videos about the sequel trilogy, where I discuss what happened, how things got so political around it. And despite starting out just wanting to talk some Star Wars, I do know that many of you have subscribed to me for my more, shall we say, social commentary style videos that usually also involve Star Wars somehow, or some other type of pop culture or entertainment topic. I've even had people tell me that I should make a second channel just for that sort of thing, and separate it from my Star Wars talk. And the funny thing is, I actually did make a second channel, but for the opposite reason. I made a second channel that I wanted to be even more lighthearted, to focus more on strictly gaming, collecting, meme reviews, and so on. Anyway, no, this is not an announcement for an upcoming third channel or anything like that. Instead, going forward, I do want to continue to focus primarily on Star Wars, which is why I think most of you are here, yet I do realize some of you are here for either both Star Wars and social commentary, and there are those of you just here more for the social commentary. And so what I'm going to do is mainly reserve Sunday for these type of videos, or videos that tend to stray from Star Wars and talk about larger issues in entertainment and beyond, perhaps. And I'm not saying I'll do one of these each and every single week, or that I'll never make a video that discusses these things on other days, but if I do make them on other days, they'll likely be very heavily Star Wars related, and that overall every day but Sunday I'll go with what I always meant to do with this channel, which is just talk some Star Wars, and sometimes videos about other similar things like Marvel, DC, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and whatever else it might be. Basically, I want to get more back to just Star Wars, yet I also will make the social commentary style videos, on Sundays usually, that I know some of you are here for. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about anything and everything I had to say. And whatever that might be, do leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars or whatever else it might be. And until next time, thanks for watching.